They see the word Islamic and they run a mile. Either saying, well, it's not for me, or saying it's too niche, which I always found weird because it's like there's 2 billion people who are Muslim on the planet. A spark like somewhere deep down inside me went off, which was like, imagine I could do this for someone like me, where, you know, I'm a Muslim, a practicing Muslim. Why don't we combine what I know in fintech, what he knows in Islamic banking, and try and do something? And that's how it began. And that's where the idea of a Muslim, of money management came from. Help people budget, save, and then eventually invest without compromise.
We're live. So today I have with me Areeb from Kestrl, who's the CEO and founder. Kestrl is a Muslim money app that helps Muslims to manage their wealth. So if you're joining us for the first time, I'm Umar and we're the Bay HQ. We're all about inspiring the next generation of British Asians to chase their dreams and build what they want to build. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you leave us a 5-star review and also subscribe on YouTube. So let's dive in to the story straight away. So when you were growing up, what were your ambitions? What did you want to be? Like, what did you think one day I want to be that when I'm older?
Well, definitely not what I'm doing now. What I really wanted to do was I wanted to be a researcher studying big cats, especially tigers, making nature documentaries, which hopefully I will get to do one day. But that was absolutely 100% what I wanted to do. Like, I used to watch people like Steve Irwin, Crocodile Hunter, or even now Steve Backshaw, Deadly 60, and think that's really what I want to do. Like being out there in the rainforest, grappling big snakes and tracking down tigers. Yeah, that was really what I wanted to do.
Why didn't you do it?
Honestly, I'm the eldest of 3 boys, children of immigrants, my parents from Pakistan. And when you're the eldest, I don't know if you can relate to it yourself, there's like a lot of pressure on you to go down the beaten path, stick with the safest route possible, which is, you know, my dad's in finance, you should stick to finance. So there was definitely that steering almost throughout my education that, okay, this is always where you're going to end up. And I did try and rebel against that a little bit at uni with what I ended up studying and, you know, different things. But one day I could still go down that route.
What did you study in the end?
Oh, I did physics. Yeah, okay. I did physics, which was a compromise.
That's rebellion.
So what I wanted to do was zoology. But my parents were like, this is madness, right? What would your aunts and uncles say? What would your grandparents say? Like, how are you going to make a job? How are you going to support your family? What's happening with that? Which I wish I had like an older sibling or someone who could just say, it doesn't matter what you do at uni. It doesn't even matter if you go to uni anymore, right? Like all that matters are just the advantages which you're given and what you do with it. But anyway, my compromise was, look, a lot of people do physics and go into finance rather than just going into doing business or finance or economics. Let me do this. I'll study astrophysics for a little bit of material science, nuclear physics, and then can go off and be the financial zombie, which they wanted me to be.
And is that what you did in the end?
I did, yeah. So I started, I did a few interviews at consultancies, investment banks, and I took an offer at Deloitte, a grad scheme, which was a really good time, actually. Yeah, an amazing time.
So you were in the corporate world for a little while as well, right?
Yeah.
How did you find that experience? Did you still have that yearning to be in the jungle with the big cats?
It was always there, and I used to do things like wildlife photography. I had an Instagram page, which is still up to date, still updates every now and then. And I would write, about science and everything from dinosaurs to, immune therapy, to cancer research, all that kind of thing. I was trying to keep that dream alive. But it was always this idea that what I was doing was nice and, I was being paid very well, thankfully, and I was learning. It just wasn't fulfilling and it wasn't what I really wanted to do. And it didn't feel like I was making a difference to anyone. It just felt like I was working. So in Deloitte, I was working really for banks and wealth managers, helping them to navigate regulations, get around big fines or investigate people for fraud and stuff like that. It didn't feel like I was actually doing anything that materially impacted people around me. So it wasn't that fulfilling. I stayed at Deloitte for 3 years and then moved out to a little boutique consultancy. Deloitte, big company, thousands of people, then moved to a little consultancy with only about 100 people at the time, which was a really, really different experience. And that's where I started to learn about fintech, because a lot of their clients were wealth managers who were looking to digitally transform. Have you heard of Nutmeg?
Yeah.
People like that, robo-advisors were my first clients. So I got to see what worked strategically, what didn't work. But what was great about it was, okay, these are fintechs, startups, although they were very big at the time, with millions in funding. They were helping real people. They were here helping the mass market to actually learn about investing and get ahead in that and grow their wealth. And that's where a kind of, not a light bulb, but a tiny little spark, like somewhere deep down inside me went off, which was like, imagine I could do this for someone like me, where, I'm a Muslim, a practicing Muslim. And for many Muslims, because of the requirements put down by our faith, we cannot use conventional financial products. We can't invest or use normal banking products because of the prohibition on interest, which makes it very difficult to do anything from savings accounts to mortgages to investing into a fund. So I was like, why doesn't this exist for someone like me, right? And there's 2 billion of us on the planet.
Only a few of you.
Yeah, just a few. So why doesn't that exist? But that was like the tiny little bit of an idea that formed when I was working there. Yeah.
Yeah, and like looking at that as well, when you're using these different products, and like you said, so the main, obviously I'm not Muslim myself, so if I'm trying to understand the limits you had in terms like with the religion, like how that means you can invest your money. So is the key thing that you can't lend out money and receive interest on it? Is that
you can't receive interest or pay interest in any way, shape or form. So interest is a big no-go. In our holy book, the Quran, there are many verses saying how interest is, very bad. Generally, it's tantamount to a major sin. So you can't receive interest on a savings account. I can't be paying interest on a mortgage. Otherwise, you're effectively, sinning. So that was something which a lot of Muslims grapple with. Many people end up going with conventional accounts and dealing with interest just because there's not a lot of conventional, good alternatives out there. So it's like a real thing which many Muslims deal with. Yeah. The interest is like the first bit to it. There's many other things like, okay, you can't put anything into weapons, you can't invest into drugs, alcohol, gambling, things like that.
Yeah. And so with that, what would you invest, like how would you invest your money in another way? So like before Kestrl was invented, what were you able to do? Or what were your options?
There's a couple of Islamic savings accounts in the UK, people like Al Rayyan Bank or Gatehouse Bank, and there are some Islamic funds, but the common denominator between all of them was really poor customer service. If you walked into a branch of one of these banks, it felt like you were going to another country 30 years ago. Where sometimes people were rude to you and, nothing really worked on time. It would take months to take out a mortgage, weeks to open a savings account. So customer service poor, terrible user experience. If they did have an app, big if, it wasn't really worth speaking of. The website was really poorly designed. Felt like you were getting into a black hole of information that didn't really mean anything to you. And the final thing was price. A lot of these things were priced more expensively just because there is a smaller market. They felt like they were, in order to make money, they had to charge higher. So all of these things were quite prohibitive for people out there. So there were solutions. Most people were not using them.
And then, so once you had the idea, well, you could see what the problem was, right? When was the idea that like, actually, maybe I can do something about this? And like actually trying to make that into a reality? Like what was the first steps you took there?
It came a little later. So I was at Deloitte for 3 years. I moved to a consultancy called Alpha, where suddenly I wasn't just like one of the only brown people there. I was one of the only Asians there. One of the only Muslims there. So that really, I don't know, it really affected me. I didn't feel at home. I didn't quite feel myself. And, the people there were amazing, but it was different. I didn't like socializing in an environment where there was loads of alcohol. And to get ahead, it kind of felt like you had to do those things and go out the late nights and go to the pub or go to the club or whatever it was. So I never quite felt at home. And it really came around where I just decided I want to take a year out to focus on myself. So almost on a whim, I just started to apply to different master's courses, MBAs specifically. So I applied to Cambridge, to Oxford, and to London Business School. I took the GMAT exam, which is like the entrance exam for MBAs in like a 2-week period, and just sent off applications, not expecting anything. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. I just thought, let's see what happens. And then I started to get interview calls. And I was like, okay, this is suddenly becoming real. I didn't tell anyone until I started getting the offers. And that's when I was like, okay, to my parents, I think I really, really want to do this. And I don't know why, but I just need to take some time out to figure out what's going on, where I want to go. I don't know if I want to stay in consulting. Maybe I want to go do something else. And for them, it was kind of a hit, like, wait, you're taking a year out of work. But also when I said, I'll go to Cambridge, that really kind of softened the blow a little bit.
I was about to say, were they okay with it because it was Cambridge?
They were okay. Yeah, they were very happy with it. So I took a year out to kind of find myself. And that's where I met my co-founder. And we thought, okay, why don't we combine what I know in fintech, what he knows in Islamic banking, he worked out in Malaysia, and try and do something. And that's how it began.
Yeah, and even like then, so you've got the idea, you've got the fintech background, he's got the like Islamic finance background. What was the actual, like, how did you start? Like, what was because obviously building an app for a lot of people is very intimidating, right?
Yeah.
Obviously there are no code tools and all these different ways of doing it. Yeah. How did you start off? Was like an MVP you started off with, or?
Yeah, we started with a survey, right? So we just thought, okay, I think I want this and I think you want this. How do we know people actually care about this? So we started off just interviewing people and asking them some very simple questions like, do you care about Islamic finance? Do you use any products today? Would you use one? Why aren't you using the ones which are out there today? And this started as a small thing. We would just stand outside the mosque in Cambridge. Then we went to London and did the same thing. Then we made it an online survey. And before you knew it, we had about 1,500 responses. So that's how we found it and tried to validate the idea. The original version of Kestrl was a debit card. Like, let's do Monzo for Muslims. That was really fashionable at the time. It was 2019, and a few other people were trying a similar thing. So there was Nia and Rizq and My Ahmed. All of these guys were like, we're going to be the Monzo for Muslims. We were like, why don't we throw our hat into the ring and see if we could do it, right, with our background. We discovered something really interesting from the survey was 95% of the applicants, and this is people from Cambridge all the way to Edinburgh, said, I do care about Islamic finance. I do want to avoid interest. I care about not going to hell, right, basically. But fewer than 5% were actually using the existing solutions out there. And the reasons they cited were what I said before. Poor customer service, terrible user experience, high fees, and ultimately people didn't trust them. So they were like, if you can start to solve those things, that's something I would do. But when we had a final question at the end, which I'm so glad we asked, which was, of these products, which is the most interesting to you? And we had debit card, investment account, personal finance, all this kind of thing. And only about 2% of people picked debit card. And we were like, wait, like what's going on? Because we've got all these people out here who are launching debit cards. Why are we going down this route? And that's when our first kind of idea pivoted. I hesitate to say pivot because we hadn't built anything, but we were like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out what we're doing here. And that's where the idea of money management, let's help people budget, save, and then eventually invest came from.
Yeah. And where does the actual name come from? What does it mean?
So Kestrel is the name of a bird. It's a little falcon that lives here in the UK. And it started off as a joke because kestrels eat starlings. And the idea we were like, oh, we're going to take down Starling Bank. And then the name just kind of stuck. So that's where it comes from.
Okay, because I was wondering, I thought it was a bird. It's like, I wasn't quite sure the connection now.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of it. Some people think it's like, oh, is it because like you're Muslim and Middle East and falconry is big there? And we're like, yeah, sure. If you want to go with that, we can go with that.
But it's good to have the mystery sometimes, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, I guess so. And there's also studies which say that words beginning with K stick in the mind more, like Coca-Cola or Kodak, or it was just a happy coincidence.
And so did you actually start the company when you're in university still, or was it the research phase then and you started?
End of 2019, we actually came together, formed the business, but we needed something else, we realized, because Dying and I had been going out and speaking to potential investors, and we were, at best, people weren't taking us seriously. At worst, people were getting very aggressive and angry at us. So we were speaking with Islamic banking experts, and some of them, I remember one meeting, the worst meeting, was a guy, we had a pitch deck, we put it up on the screen, we got to slide 2, which is this is Kestrl, Muslim money app, helping Muslims grow their wealth without compromise. And the guy lost it. He was like, I've been in this industry since you were in diapers, right? What can you teach me about this? What are you going to tell me there's anything new? You guys are 220 somethings. You're never going to do anything in this space. You're never going to raise any money. You've been nowhere. You've done nothing. You got nothing going for you. And Dying, he's a good guy. He was just taking it, big smile on his face. I lost it and I started shouting back at the guy. And I was just like, why did you call us up here? What was the point of this? Right? Because he asked for the meeting, right? So it was just a bizarre kind of thing. And I remember leaving that meeting and it was so heated. And my dad's office was around the corner. So he wanted to know how the meeting went. So we stopped by and then he was like, we took him through the business plan and basically sold him on the idea. So my dad, for context, he has over 30 years of experience in financial services. He was the global head of audit and compliance at Bank of New York, then Royal Bank of Scotland, and, has worked with the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority. So we were like, do you want to come on board as a co-founder as well, equal parts? I think people are less likely to shout at us if you're in the room as well. You can be CFO, I'll be CEO, and Dying is the chief operating officer. And we did it. We shook hands then, and that was it. We were the original founding team. And that's kind of how it started. So with, Dying's knowledge of Islamic finance, what I knew about fintech, and my dad's just kind of presence as well as being our CFO and knowing everything he does about that, we managed to make a go of it.
For people in the audience, I guess, who haven't pitched before, it's funny how often that kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
So for example, people will message me or cold email me to be like, I want to come on the podcast.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they'll email me quite a few times. They're like, okay, sure, come on. And they're like, oh, can you tell me why I should come on? you messaged me.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that happens quite often where people have these, I think something that's automated or something like that, they get somebody in their team to do it. But I've had that a few times now, and it's same thing with investment or things like that, where somebody's like, oh, it's really interesting, like, I want to talk to you. But then they want you to then prove. And it's like, it's a weird cycle sometimes. And
I don't know. And I think, I don't know if it's PC to say this on this podcast, but I think sometimes in some British Asian communities, we just like become quite passive aggressive or even just full on actively aggressive towards other people. And I don't know if that's what was happening here, but we were just speaking to other people in this community, and like British Pakistanis and Indians and Bangladeshis, and not all of them were like respectful. Yeah. Right. But that really changed when my dad was in the room. So I think age and seniority is still weighted really, really heavily over ideas.
I think it's an important point. It's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing, guys, to try and change this attitude of like, get people together and get people to build each other up. Because it's easy to pull people down, right? That's easy. But how can we build something that actually makes a difference? And like what you're doing now. And it's obviously your dad's experience obviously really helped. But it's a shame that if your business was the same before and after him in terms of what
he would just sit in the room silently. Yeah. Right? He wasn't saying anything. But we raised money because my dad was on the pitch deck. Like, I'm not joking. We raised our first pre-seed round. It was like 150K within 3 months of that, because someone was like, look, I see hundreds of pitch decks, right? I see a lot of people saying that they're going to do this. Some of the other competitors I mentioned earlier were all fundraising at the same time, but they were like, I trust you because your dad's sat there watching you guys. You're not just going to go and take my money and burn it all. So it helps massively. So that is an unfair advantage, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting. What I like is that you're able to openly admit that.
Yeah.
Some people have that different advantages, like you said, unfair advantages from family backgrounds, things like that, but they don't openly say it. So it's good for people to know, for example, that that's helped you on your journey.
Oh no, absolutely. Right. I'm so, embroiled with way more founders. I meet so many where we're part of the TechStars portfolio office. So we sit around others, and I know exactly like what's been an unfair advantage, because we've needed it so much. When we walk into a room and we say, oh, we're an Islamic fintech, usually most people, like, the light goes out in their eyes and I see it and they're like, oh, it's not for me. I'm not interested. I'm not doing that. So we really need to go for every advantage we can.
So you've raised more capital since then,
yes.
Right? Like, what's your current fundraise? Like, whereabouts are you now?
So our first round was 150. The second one was about 500K. We're in the middle of a 2 million raise at the moment, which we call pre-series A or seed plus, which is what we're doing right now. And we're being backed by Wahid Invest, which is the largest Islamic fintech in the world. They're leading our round. They have a venture capital arm as well. So they're leading the round, and we've got TechStars and some other people, angel networks as well, coming on board too.
Really good as well. But some people might not know what TechStars is.
Explain, sorry,
how TechStars fits into it, like how they've helped you on your journey of building
TechStars was huge. So look, I suppose before we get to TechStars, it was an interesting journey because we raised our first pre-seed round, we launched our app, and it was really interesting. It was a money management tool. We kind of thought, okay, what do people need and what's easiest to build? So we went with, okay, open banking was this new regulation, which meant that all banks had to have open APIs. So anyone who wanted to could draw down their information, their data from their bank's transactions, your income, everything you're doing with your bank account. You could pull it into a third-party app, in this case, Kestrl. So we were like, people have told us they don't want to switch accounts. It's really hard to get someone to switch into a new digital bank. Monzo, even with all of their money, it was tough for them to get to where they are today, and Starling, everyone the same, let alone a Muslim debit card, right? That's even harder. So we went with open banking. Just plug in your bank account. You'll see all your stuff in one place. We'll create a budget for you. Then we'll help you to auto-save into pots to your goals. Maybe you're saving for a wedding, a car, a house, or just in general. We'll save that. That was relatively easy for us to build. And it was going okay. It was growing nicely, organically, and we had a little office and doing all that. But then this interesting thing happened. A big Islamic bank reached out to us from Malaysia, the biggest Islamic bank there, called Bank Islam. And they said, we like what you're doing. We want to white label this tool and use it to power our own digital bank, which we're launching. So we said, yeah, well, let's go with it. But then there was this kind of back and forth period because the sales cycles take a long time when you're selling B2B, business to business, as opposed to directly to consumers. And in that period was like one of the scariest times for us because we were bleeding money, right? We're like, okay, we've grown a tech team. Dying went back to Malaysia, formed a big team over there of about, at the time it was like 10 people. And we were bleeding money and we had this consumer app. And we kept thinking, is this bank taking us for a ride? Or are we actually going to sell to them? And it got to the point where I hadn't drawn a salary in like 6 months, and Dying hadn't. And Dying had like 4 kids, right? At the time, I had just gotten married and had a baby on the way. So I was like, okay, this is really tough. Why have we done this? And those were some really dark moments. And then literally we had 1 month of runway left, and then Bank Islam came and said, let's sign this. Let's do it. And I was like, thank God, right? Thank God that this happened. It was the scariest, probably one of the darkest moments there. And, like my mental health took like a real hit. I learned the connection between your mental health and your physical health. But once that happened, things changed. We reached out to TechStars. Now, TechStars is
Just before we go on to TechStars for a moment there, so I think like you made such an important point there, because with the B2B cycles, it's really tough, like you said, because it sometimes takes a really long time. And even the conversations we're having, right, people can seem really enthusiastic, but it's not them making the decision. Or even the person making the decision, then somebody above them does something else, or the budget changes. And then even though they had the right intention, you're then cut, and that's so scary.
Yeah.
And it's something which I like that you're able to just admit that as well, because you always see what wins, right? So you could just come on here and just say like, yeah, we won this massive deal with like Bank Islam, right? But that misses out a bit of all that scariness that was underneath it. And a lot of people be in that scary moment right now and be like, okay, it's normal. And it's working out how to mitigate that, right? Because it might not have come through. Who knows? What would you have done then? And
we'd be dead. Yeah, without a doubt, we would be dead. And a lot of people were dying, right? Our competitors were going under because they had bet entirely. Well, not bet. Gambling is haram. But they bet on B2C and the debit card. And that's tough because you need a lot of money to make that work and make that growth loop actually turn. So we were like, maybe this is a way out, away from the B2C thing, which is hard. B2B, there's good money, it's regular money, the contracts are longer, but it's hard, right? It takes a long time. And like you said, you may not be talking to the decision maker, right? You don't know who's actually going to be doing that. And sometimes conversations just die like that. So we didn't know. And I was like, the stress wasn't just on me, because I was like, okay, I knew the risk. Dying, my co-founder in Malaysia, he knew the risk. My dad was going to be okay. But we've got employees, right, who I sold this vision to. You're not just pitching to investors or customers, you're pitching to all the people who join you on that journey, who are like giving up their day jobs and coming to work with you, often at a cut to what their previous salary was. So it's like, I might have just screwed up all these people's lives, right? So that was like the kind of thoughts that were going through my head. And then thankfully it happened. And that's when things started to take off for us.
And then joining the TechStars program, what happened there, and how did TechStars help you accelerate further?
So TechStars is a venture capital firm and an accelerator. So what that means is they invest into you, but they also make you join a program where they're teaching you. You attend lectures every week, every day, basically, over a 3-month period. So it's a pretty intense time. And the idea is that you enter the accelerator as one thing, and you'll come out as like a big company that knows what they're doing and is able to go away and fundraise. Now, as a Islamic fintech or Islamic anything, it's pretty hard to get mainstream recognition, like doing what you're doing. So we'd approached venture capital firms before in the UK and the US, but most people, they see the word Islamic and they run a mile, either saying, well, it's not for me, or saying it's too niche, which I always found weird, because it's like, there's 2 billion people who are Muslim on the planet. What do you mean we're niche? But TechStars was different. And a lot of credit goes to, I think, Salim Chowdhury, who's the managing director of TechStars London. So he's from a Muslim background himself, British Bangladeshi, understood what we were doing immediately. And the first person in TechStars who actually saw our application immediately just passed it over. And then I just DM'd Salim on LinkedIn, because I saw he was posting like, oh, there's like 3 spots left in our cohort, just like apply now. And I DM'd him and said, hey, I submitted an application like 6 months ago, never heard back, just wondering. And then he just said, let's jump on the phone. Let's have a chat. He found the application and was like, someone discarded it. I'm taking another look at it, especially in light of the B2B deal that we'd landed. He was like, this is interesting. Let's try and take this further. And I'll always owe him for that, because he took a chance on us. And as soon as the TechStars brand was behind us, a big conventional brand, they kind of like Y Combinator, not as quite as big as Y Combinator or as well known, but they're known, they're well known. That changed things for us.
And like, where are you today now? Like, you've had all this progress, you've had the big fundraise, you're raising more money now. What's your progress? So you've obviously had that big deal a while ago.
Yeah.
What's happened since then?
So we landed that deal about 11 months ago. So what we've been doing is, as soon as we made that deal public, and we also went public with TechStars, many more banks have been reaching out to us, and wealth managers from Malaysia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Emirates. So we've been talking to all these guys and pitching to all these guys. And the sales cycles take a long time, 12 months to 18 months. But we're at a point now where we think we're hopefully, or inshallah, going to sign a deal with a few people, some out in the UAE, some in Saudi, some in Malaysia. So that's where we're going, down this B2B angle. But my heart is still with our consumer app. which is still here, it's still growing. And what I want to do is make enough money that we can stand on our own 2 feet as a company without needing more and more funding, and then really invest into why I started this, which was to help the Muslim community here in the UK to invest, to save, to bank without compromise.
I thought you were going to say my heart is still with the wildlife photography.
It's still there. It's still there. And eventually, when all this is done, that's where I want to go.
When Kestrl has made it and you retire early at like 30 years old, like
I missed that boat, unfortunately. But yeah. One day.
And like for people like listening right now, potentially going to use the app or looking at that. So you said like it's about managing people's budgets, and what's the kind of model there? So do they pay a monthly subscription and then they get access to these features? Or how does that side of things work?
There's a freemium tier where you can just plug in your banks and get the budget. But if you want to do the auto saving part, or if you want to do the stock screening, if you want to invest into Apple or Microsoft and see whether it's compliant or not Islamically, there's some subscription tiers to that. We're still playing around with that. A lot of it is still free, so you can, of course, check it out now. But we do want to start monetizing that more and more. But we're in a nice position where the majority of our money comes from B2B, so we can experiment and do more stuff without having to put a big, formidable price tag on our consumer app.
I think that's one of the nice things about the B2B side is that you're then working with companies which have huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
Which means that when you're looking at the average consumer who maybe is struggling a bit financially, you can give them quite a lot for free because you're not dependent on them for the income of the business.
Exactly.
So I think that's quite a nice way to do things, which I think I've seen a few people do now. And it's also a way to think about things for people who want. Often people, when they're starting a business, they think really about B2C because it's easiest for them to relate to. But sometimes B2B can really help you get the funding in place to be able to experiment with the B2C side and really help the people that you want to help.
It's an interesting thing because they can work really nicely together as well, where B2C becomes like this innovation arm, which you can't really do in the B2B world, because if you're working with a big bank, or like you'll know from your consulting background, they're not really about innovation. They want to play it safe. They just want to, don't do anything that's going against the curve. So B2C lets us just do what we want, but that's also been a great form of marketing for our B2B business, because banks are looking at what our consumer app does and says, we'd love to be able to do the same thing. So yeah, it's a weird, and I want to just stress, this was a complete accident. We didn't just set that out with B2B in mind. It just happened. So I can't take credit for that. For that plan, or we just followed it through when the opportunity came our way.
So it's been great to chat. We're going to go to quick fire questions now.
Sure.
So the first one is, who are 3 British Asian entrepreneurs that you'd love to shout out and you think people should be paying attention to?
So one is, I think he's already been here, Navjot Soni. So Nav, he's founder of the Washing Machine Project, which is amazing. I think the humanitarian version of Dyson, where they create hand-turning washing machines, which have been helping refugees, asylums, anyone who needs it, all the way from Afghanistan over to Ukraine. So definitely Nav. Second, Sadiq Dorasat. So he's the founder, the CEO of Muslim Census, which is the largest independent organization collecting data on Muslims here in the UK and beyond, which helps to inform better decisions all the way from politics to business. He's doing amazing work. He's also a product manager at Wahid Invest, which is friendly Islamic fintech. And the final one, we mentioned him before, is Salim Chowdhury, managing director of TechStars. Amazing guy. Look, he gave us our platform. He took a chance on us when no one else would. And he should be more well known in the venture community. So I keep telling him to do more and more branding, but he's going to get out.
Yeah, we'll get him on here as well.
Definitely.
He's a good guy, yeah. And next question is, people listening right now want to learn more about you, learn more about Kestrl.
Yeah.
Where should they go to? What could they reach out about?
Yeah, you can check me out on LinkedIn, Areeb Siddiqui. Check out our website, kestrl.io or kestrl.co.uk. If you want to talk about anything from starting a business, if you're just in idea mode, if you want to fundraise, should you be fundraising, come and chat to me. The more basic things like personal finance, investing as a Muslim, if you're trying to avoid interest, chat to us. We're more than happy to talk to you.
And then on the other side, is there anything that the audience might be able to help you with?
Yeah, we're always looking for B2B introductions, anyone who's happy to share their B2B sales process, because it's a learning curve where we're still trying to figure out how to make that process work. So we need help with that. And yeah, fundraising as well. Fundraising is a journey we're still going on. We're still figuring out angel investing versus VC investing. So if anyone has any tips or has been through that before, please do drop me a message.
So thanks so much for coming on. Have you got any final words to the audience?
Final words. If you have a dream when you were a kid, don't think it was, stupid. Like, I still want to get into the wildlife thing. It's just I'm taking a bit more of a longer route to get there. Life gets in the way, but I didn't want to do financial services, but I took that and I used it to do something which I found fulfilling. So you don't need to throw away your experience. You can still use that in a way, and that becomes your advantage. What makes you unfairly advantaged compared to your competitors. So you never know what's going to, where you can draw strength from.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us. And we don't think you realise how important you are. Because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission, and you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.